Chapter 1365. Tang Guo left. She returned to the underwater dragon palace with Yin Yarrow. Not long after, the two held a grand wedding at the bottom of the sea. They swore to each other that they would be together forever and never leave each other. The members of the Sea Clan were happy for their union. Yin Yarrow didn't inherit the position of the Ocean King. The Ocean King was so angry that his beard curled up. He scolded him whenever he saw him, saying that he didn't even want the position of the Ocean King now that he had a wife. The Ocean King was a very open-minded dragon. He didn't force Yin Yarrow, and he did have many sons. If Yin Yarrow didn't inherit the position of the Ocean King, he could still choose other sons, even if they weren't as outstanding as Yin Yarrow. In the 20 years that Yin Yarrow and Tang Guo lived together, he emptied his palace of treasures. The members of the Sea Clan knew how much Yin Yarrow loved his wife. He even changed the favorite treasures of the Dragon Clan into accessories and wore them on her body. For more than 20 years, the two of them had never quarreled. Every time they appeared, it was like a bowl of public display of affection. The onlookers were all full from eating. The members of the Sea Clan were envious of Yin Yarrow and Guoguo's love. They thought that love of mutual love and affection was the best. After the incident with Fu Ya, the members of the Sea Clan thought that love wasn't a one-sided effort, but a mutual affection after two people fell in love with each other. If one would be hurt in love, then this person must not love you enough. Just like Fu Ya, one would be covered with bruises in the end. After that incident, the members of the Sea Clan didn't like to date humans anymore. The barrier between them and humans was thicker. Love could be found anywhere. They didn't have to write countless love stories for the human clan. They were looking forward to a beautiful love. Suddenly, one day, they couldn't find the couple that they thought was the best and most compatible couple. They seemed to have become the wind on the sea and were blown away. Another day, they heard the sorrowful cry of the Ocean King. They found out that Yin Yarrow had dissipated his divine power and gave up his life. When they asked again, they found out that a Guoguo of the Mermaid clan was dead. Yin Yarrow couldn't accept the departure of his lover. He couldn't bear not having a lover for so long. He also chose to disperse his divine power and left with Guoguo. The divine power scattered on the surface of the sea, allowing the oceanic race to benefit. However, their hearts were filled with sorrow. Freya, who lived in the human villa, also felt it when Tang Guo died. She sat up in the huge water tank, and a vivid expression finally appeared on her face, which attracted the attention of Pei Jiang, who was dealing with documents. He quickly walked to her side and asked, "Fuya, are you feeling unwell?" No, I'm fine." Freya looked at the human who had silently accompanied her for more than 20 years and whispered, "Guoguo is dead." "Guoguo? She really, you know?" Freya asked. Pei Jiang nodded and told him what had happened. "No wonder I received a message from Yin Yarrow a few days ago. He said he wanted to leave this place forever. It turns out that a Guoguo is dead." Freya was stunned for a long time before she said, "Pei Jiang, I want to go out for a walk. Can you accompany me?" "All right." Tang Guo opened her eyes and saw a pile of homework books. She rubbed her temples and asked, "Student?" She glanced at the books in front of her that were almost done. The neat notes were very pleasing to the eye. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1366. She looked at the page of homework and saw that there was not a single word wrong. She was a good student. She flipped through her notebooks, workbooks, textbooks, and the like. She discovered that these were all high school textbooks. She was in her first year of high school. Actually, she quite liked school life. Everything she did was relatively easy, and she was quite happy studying. System: you can also eat the ice cream that a certain someone bought for you. After confirming that she was a high school student, Tang Guo began to lie on a small bed at the side, receiving the memories of this world. After reading through the memories, her expression was somewhat unsightly. In this world, the identity of this body was still a female supporting character. Moreover, it was a female supporting character with a very tragic ending. Of course, if one only looked at the things in this room and those neat and tidy notes, one wouldn't believe that her future would be so helpless. The tragic fate of this body was inseparable from the female lead of this world, Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling was currently in her 3rd year of middle school. She was her little cousin. If Tang Guo was an obedient girl in the eyes of parents, then Wu Lingling was a mischievous girl. Saying that she was a girl was praising her, because her personality was completely like that of a boy. The high school that she studied in was the same as the junior high school that Wu Lingling studied in. The junior high school was on the left, and the senior high school was on the right. Tang Guo was famous in the school for being a good student. In the eyes of parents, she was an obedient, sensible, and had good grades. She was the kind of child that was rumored to be in other people's families. Wu Lingling was mischievous, willful, and rebellious. When she was in junior high school, she dyed her hair in various colors. She was the rumored little delinquent girl. She often brought a few of her little sisters, called herself the boss, and asked her classmates for protection money. She also had some dealings with hooligans outside. In short, she wasn't a happy person. Originally, the fates of the two shouldn't be related. Wu Lingling also didn't think highly of obedient girls like Tang Guo who only listened to her parents. Her life was arranged by her family, and she didn't have any sense of self. Tang Guo also didn't like Wu Lingling because she thought that Wu Lingling didn't learn good things at such a young age. She actually skipped classes every day to play outside. She spent so much of her parents' money and didn't study hard. This was a waste of her parents' efforts, and she didn't even listen to her parents. She didn't like to get close to this kind of girl. At the beginning, Wu Lingling became brothers with a group of hooligans in the society. Moreover, the big brother of this group of hooligans, who was the male protagonist of this world, Lu Jing, got to know each other through a fight. Actually, Lu Jing's background wasn't bad, but he was in his rebellious phase. He didn't like to listen to his family and liked to fool around outside. He got to know Wu Lingling by accident. He thought that Wu Lingling had a strong personality, so the two of them became brothers from the very beginning. Lu Jing had some grudges with another group of gangsters. Naturally, Wu Lingling didn't have a good impression of them. Because they spent a lot of time together, Lu Jing gradually liked Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling also liked Lu Jing. Whenever Lu Jing went to fight, Wu Lingling would bring her friends to cheer him on. As time went by, everyone knew that Wu Lingling was Lu Jing's woman. Lu Jing's underlings also called Wu Lingling's sister-in-law, and Wu Lingling had no objections. The turn of events occurred when Lu Jing's opponent wanted to take revenge on Lu Jing and captured Wu Lingling. He planned to call Lu Jing and ask for a sum of money. Otherwise, he would rape Wu Lingling. Fupin Vertex. Chapter 1367. Wu Lingling was really frightened at that time. Although she had seen many things, this was the first time she saw these fierce men trying to rip off her clothes. Wu Lingling quickly called Lu Jing. Usually, he would pick up the phone as soon as she called, but today, she couldn't get through even after several calls. Those men didn't seem to want to give up. Seeing that Lu Jing didn't come, they wanted to make a move on Wu Lingling. In a moment of desperation, Wu Lingling thought of the original owner, Tang Guo. Tang Guo's family was relatively rich. These men only wanted tens of thousands of yuan. She thought that calling Tang Guo would be useful. No matter what, they were still cousins. She was afraid that Tang Guo would not be willing to send the money over if she knew the truth. So, she lied and said that she was in trouble and had to pay for the damage. If she didn't pay up, she couldn't leave today and asked her to send the money over first. The original owner was smart. She said that she would transfer the money to Wu Lingling and wouldn't send it over personally. The original owner did this because her mother had always taken good care of Wu Lingling's family. When her parents were on a business trip, they told her to take care of Wu Lingling. If she didn't help Wu Lingling, she would be scolded. She didn't think it was a big deal to ask for some money. Wu Lingling asked the hooligans around if she could transfer the money. Seeing that Lu Jing was really uncontactable, the hooligans agreed to transfer the money. The original owner transferred the money to Wu Lingling and Wu Lingling immediately gave it to the hooligans. The hooligans weren't interested in her afro hair and flat chest. But they remembered the pleasant voice they heard just now and asked Wu Lingling who had transferred the money to her. Wu Lingling thought that it was fine and casually said that it was her cousin. The hooligans said that the voice was quite pleasant. Was the person good-looking too? Wu Lingling pursed her lips. She was quite good-looking. She was a good student. Other people's children were good-looking, good at studies, loved by everyone, had loving parents and were especially rich. Unlike her family, where her father was an alcoholic. Her mother only urged her to study hard and try to get into a good university so that she could stand out and change her fate. She didn't like this kind of life that was arranged by others. She felt that it was meaningless to lose her freedom at such a young age. How great was it now? She could do whatever she wanted. She looked down on Tang Guo and thought that she was too rigid. The gangsters didn't believe it. How could there be such a perfect person? Wu Lingling happened to have Tang Guo's photo, so she showed them Tang Guo's photo. She was indeed a fair and clean little girl. As a high school student, of course, she was better developed than a middle school student. When the leader of the hooligans saw the original owner, he had some thoughts. Wu Lingling was released, but she didn't take this matter to heart. As for the money he borrowed from Tang Guo, he subconsciously forgot to return it. Tang Guo's family didn't lack those tens of thousands of yuan. She had probably forgotten about it. Her aunt often gave her money, so she didn't care about this at all. One day after school, when she passed by an alley, she saw Tang Guo being dragged away by several burly men. Wu Lingling screamed in fright. She wanted to chase after them, but those hoodlums waved their knives in front of her. Although she was a delinquent girl, she had never seen real knives and guns. When the knife was colder than her neck, she was scared out of her wits. She didn't know that the leader of the hooligans who had taken her away liked fresh and young female students the most, especially beautiful and obedient girls like her. She didn't dare to tell the school or her parents what he did to such an obedient girl. She didn't dare to sue him even if he threatened her a little. X767E, and X9540, and X4E00, and X4E0B, and X201C, quick crossover, female supporting character, calm down, and X722A, and X4E66, and X5C4B, and X201D, and X6700, and X65B0, and X7AE0, and X8282, and X7B2C, and X4E00, and X65F6, and X95F4, and X514D, and X8D39, and X9605, and X8BFB, and X3002, and X3002, the peak. Chapter 1368. Just like that, the original Wu Lingling was taken away in her timid state. Wu Lingling was terrified. She wanted to call the police, but the boss's men came back for some reason. He threatened her with a knife and said that if she dared to call the police, he would kill her, her family, and Lu Jing. Wu Lingling was frightened and didn't dare to call the police. She left the alley trembling and went home. That day, she didn't take her friends to fool around. She went home obediently and felt uneasy the whole day. She didn't know that when Tang Guo was taken to the car and saw with her own eyes that she was threatened, she didn't want to call the police. That pair of peaceful eyes showed hatred for Wu Lingling for the first time. What good would come of being taken away by such people? The next day, Wu Lingling went to school worriedly. She skipped a class and secretly went to the original Wu Lingling's class to see how she was doing. She found that Tang Guo was still in class obediently, as if nothing had happened. All the guilt in her heart disappeared. In fact, she didn't know that the original Wu Lingling's beautiful school uniform was full of scars and scars. The smile on her white cheeks was different from before. The smile on her lips was bitter. The feeling in her heart was painful. How could Wu Lingling know what kind of torture the original Wu Lingling, who was only 16 years old, had gone through yesterday? In the end, her photos were taken. Those hooligans were right. She didn't dare to tell anyone about it. Once the photos were leaked, not only would her life be ruined, but her parents and family would also be destroyed. She would be talked about for the rest of her life. In order to maintain a peaceful appearance, she gritted her teeth and lived. However, every day after school, she would be taken away by those hooligans and subjected to inhumane torture. Wu Lingling didn't know about this. She was still looking down on Tang Guo, who was even more dazed than before. This kind of life made the original Wu Lingling break down. Her grades dropped and she was no longer in the mood to study. She couldn't explain to her parents' disappointed eyes. Later, she finally knew why those hooligans came to her. It was because Wu Lingling showed them her photos. She would always remember how Wu Lingling timidly put away her phone and didn't call the police. Later on, Wu Lingling changed. She studied with Lu Jing and became more motivated. Her results got better and better. Seeing the original owner's grades drop, she subconsciously said, "Cousin, if you study step by step, it's actually useless. Why don't you study what you should study and play what you should play? You can easily get good grades." Wu Lingling didn't know what had happened to the original owner. She believed that the reason why the original owner's grades dropped was because she didn't have a proper learning method and was pushing herself too hard. After all, the person who was scolded by her parents every day was the original owner because her grades had dropped too much. Everyone in the family had a feeling that the original owner had run out of ideas. Wu Lingling felt that she was under too much pressure. She might as well go out and have some fun. Maybe things would get better. She didn't have any bad intentions. If Wu Lingling hadn't said it, the host wouldn't have felt anything. In this world, everyone was qualified to say this except Wu Lingling. All her tragedies were indirectly caused by Wu Lingling. The darkness that had been suppressed in the original owner's heart finally erupted at this moment. She couldn't bear it anymore. Wu Lingling jumped up and down in front of her and started to target Wu Lingling. X767E, and X9540, and X4E00, and X4E0B, and X201C, quick crossover, supporting female lead, calm down, and X722A, and X4E66, and X5C4B, and X201D, and X6700, and X65B0, and X7AE0, and X8282, and X7B2C, and X4E00, and X65F6, and X95F4, and X514D, and X8D39, and X9605, and X8BFB, and X3002, peak. Chapter 1369. The host did not have a good time against Wu Lingling. In the eyes of the family, the host did those things because Wu Lingling's grades were better than hers and her grades were declining. She was jealous of Wu Lingling. In Wu Lingling's eyes, the host was a lunatic. She was driven crazy by her parents. Although Wu Lingling's grades were better now, she did not think that studying was about studying all the time. She paid attention to the balance between work and rest. Although she did not go out to fool around like before, she still went out to play with her friends who were starting to become better. She thought that the host's madness and abnormality were caused by boredom. No matter what the host did to Wu Lingling, everyone would set her up. She was jealous of Wu Lingling's excellence and thought that Wu Lingling had surpassed her, so she did those excessive things. After the host became evil, she did a lot of things against Wu Lingling that she had never thought of before. No one knew that her world had long turned into darkness. That originally pure and innocent girl was gradually being dyed black. Her heart had already been corroded. She could not bear it. It was Wu Lingling who had indirectly harmed her, but she still made sarcastic remarks in front of her. She could not bear it. It was because Wu Lingling exposed her photos to the gangster boss that she was taken away by the gangster boss after school every day. In front of others, she was a good girl with good grades. Behind others, who would have thought that she had experienced the bloody forest? The gangster boss was not a good person. He had killed people. What would happen to such a little girl if she fell into his hands? She was forced to follow the gangster boss. Later, because Wu Lingling jumped up and down in front of her, she failed to do anything to her. She was gradually falling into the abyss, while Wu Lingling was walking towards the light. She seemed to see that she had become a real clown. She could not tell anyone what had happened to her. She could not face her real self. So, she used the gangster boss to create trouble for Wu Lingling. At first, she did cause a lot of trouble for Wu Lingling. But with Lu Jing's help, Wu Lingling escaped successfully every time. Wu Lingling became more and more outstanding. She became a good girl praised by everyone in the family. Every time the host heard Wu Lingling being praised, she would see her parents' disappointed eyes. When she returned home, she was faced with an overwhelming amount of abuse. She was no longer a normal person. Unable to defy fate, she chose to fall. She was no longer in the mood to study. All she thought about every day was how to make Wu Lingling suffer. Whatever Wu Lingling wanted to fight for, she wanted to snatch it away. She used to be a good student and an obedient girl, but she became a jealous, willful, and vicious girl who was disliked by everyone. In the end, of course, she failed to target Wu Lingling. With Lu Jing's help, the leader of the hooligans no longer protected her. The leader of the hooligans even went back on his word and published her photos. In just one night, she had been a good student in the past. She had become the woman of a hooligan boss. She had abandoned herself. She was chased out of her home and ended up on the streets. Her fate was miserable. In the end, Wu Lingling appeared and gave her a sum of money. She even said something that made her laugh. Every time she thought of this sentence, it made her despair and pain. If she could do it all over again, she would definitely choose to hang up when she received that call. Fupine Vertex. Chapter 1370. Wu Lingling said, "Take care of yourself. For the sake of my aunt's help, I can forgive you for what you did in the past. I hope you won't do anything more excessive. Otherwise, I won't be polite to you." What a nice sentence. On account of her parents' help in the past. She really didn't understand why Wu Lingling's face didn't turn red when she said those words. How could Wu Lingling not know that she was in such a predicament because of the other party when the matter was exposed? Yes, Wu Lingling knew. She also felt guilty. So much so that no matter how the original owner targeted her, she only resolved the danger and didn't do anything worse. Lu Jing also didn't understand why Wu Lingling had such a high tolerance for the original owner. Every time he wanted to be ruthless, Wu Lingling would stop him. He liked Wu Lingling. Of course, he wouldn't go against her words. Because Wu Lingling was very persistent about the original owner's matter. She even cautiously told him not to interfere. Wu Lingling knew that everything that happened to the original owner was because of a phone call, a photo, and because she was too young and scared by the gangsters, she didn't dare to call the police. But the original owner didn't need such pity. Instead, she felt that Wu Lingling's actions were like teasing a clown. She felt unbearable pain and couldn't wait for Wu Lingling to die. Everyone thought that Wu Lingling was too kind. Many years later, the original owner died. Wu Lingling even investigated how she died and took revenge on those who caused her death. Countless people thought that Wu Lingling was extremely kind. But they didn't know the reason. Even Wu Lingling's closest friend, Lu Jing, didn't know. Wu Lingling also didn't know that the person who caused the original owner's death was Lu Jing. Those people were all arranged by him. He really couldn't tolerate the existence of such a dangerous person. He didn't know when she would appear and harm his beloved woman and his children. Since then, Wu Lingling had been taking care of the original owner's parents. Every time the original owner saw Wu Lingling, she would blame herself. She said that if they took good care of the original owner, she wouldn't have become like that. They blamed themselves for not teaching their daughter well. They also felt guilty towards Wu Lingling because of what their daughter had done. They felt ashamed when Wu Lingling came to take care of them. Until their deaths, they were filled with regret for not teaching their daughter well. Because of the experiences of the original owner, they should have lived a long life, but because of their worries, their health deteriorated. When they died, Wu Lingling still hid this secret in her heart, not daring to tell anyone. She even brought it into the coffin. After reading the memories, Tang Guo began to imitate the original owner's notes and began to do the rest of the homework. In fact, every time she imitated the notes and habits, she felt that it was a piece of cake. It was as if she knew all the skills they knew. Seeing that Tang Guo was doing her homework seriously, the system did not disturb her. He could feel that his great host wasn't very happy. It was because Wu Lingling didn't say a word of apology for everything that had happened to the original owner. So what if she was silently compensating him? Could the damage done be repaired? An hour later, Tang Guo finished all her homework. Father Tang and Mother Tang were very busy and often went on business trips. They weren't around today either. They hired a lady with good character to come over regularly to help her cook and clean the house. Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1371. The auntie at home would knock on the door to wake her up after cooking. She would wait for her to finish eating and tidy up the kitchen before leaving. During this period, Tang Guo did not speak much other than exchanging a few words with the auntie. This made the system feel a little scared. It kept feeling that the host was preparing a big move. When Tang Guo lay down and was about to sleep, the system really could not help but ask, "Host, what are you going to do this time?" "Of course I'm going to study hard and improve every day." Who was she kidding? It did not believe her. It had been a long time since it saw its host so silent. She was definitely unhappy and was preparing how to take revenge on the person who hurt her. It was already sure that after receiving the memories, the host had already brought in all her emotions. That was why she was so unhappy. Tongzi. "Yes, host, if you have anything to say, just say it to me. I'm listening." Tang Guo was very important to him. In the past, he was not sensible. Now, even if he was a string of data, he actually had human emotions. If she was unhappy, he was not happy either. When I take revenge on my enemies, the method that I hate the most is to let girls be bullied by men. Tang Guo closed her eyes and said, "Because as a girl, this kind of experience is the most painful." The system expressed its understanding. This was because in the many worlds that the host had transmigrated to, according to the original trajectory, many of the original hosts would have such a miserable experience. Every time, the host would bring in their emotions and could feel their pain. Therefore, the host would never use this kind of method to take revenge on women. For example, in a previous world, the host of that world was a female ghost. She was killed by a person from a village of human trafficking. When the female lead came to the village, the host still chose to save her first, not wanting them to encounter such a thing. In the end, the female lead finally realized her mistake and regretted it. The ending was not bad. But this time, I'm not going to care. Tang Guo opened her eyes. I want to see how she would have grown if I hadn't been Wu Lingling's scapegoat, if I hadn't become her stepping stone. In this life, I want to be an outstanding student. On the surface, I want to be pure and clean. The system had a feeling that the next sentence would be different. Secretly, I will let Wu Lingling understand what it means to play and learn at the same time. No matter where, I will press her to the ground and rub her ruthlessly. System, he already felt it. The host's emotions were already very unstable. After the fusion of memories and emotions, she became the original host after the dark. However, she could control her own actions and emotions and maintain a clear mind. She had more experience than the original owner and knew more tricks. Little Wu Lingling couldn't possibly be her opponent. The next day, Tang Guo woke up early and ate the breakfast prepared by the auntie. The driver sent her to the school gate. Coincidentally, Wu Lingling and a group of delinquent girls also passed by her on a bicycle. The two of them looked at each other but did not greet each other. They had always been like this. Tang Guo directly walked past Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling hated this kind of obedient girl the most. She snorted and said to the delinquent girl beside her, "She is my aunt's daughter. Her life has been arranged since she was young. She is very rigid." Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1372. I heard that her grades are quite good. She entered high school as the top student, and she's still in first place. Everyone in the school knew that Tang Guo was a model student. Even the other schools that were competing with them often used her results to compare with their students. So what? Grades don't mean everything. We're at a good age. It's meaningless to waste everything on studying. If you don't have fun during your adolescence, you'll definitely regret it in the future. Wu Lingling and the other delinquents around her shared their opinions loudly. When she talked about Tang Guo's grades, there was jealousy in her tone that even she didn't notice. When they talked about Tang Guo's family background, there was envy that even she didn't notice. In the end, this jealousy and envy turned into jealousy. Actually, she was just saying that the grapes were sour. As a student, who didn't want to have good grades? If they had good grades, they would have face in front of their parents and teachers, and they would be able to have fun. Wu Lingling muttered. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. She raised her head and found that Tang Guo had walked in front of her without knowing what she was doing. Her face was also a little red. The feeling of being caught talking behind someone's back was very awkward. "Cousin, why aren't you going to class? You'll be late." Tang Guo glanced at her calmly. "Lingling, you're already in the 3rd year of middle school. You're going to take the high school entrance exam soon. You should be sensible. You skip class all day and fool around with hooligans outside. Haven't you thought about your aunt? In order to support your studies, your aunt works 2 jobs. She wakes up early and sleeps late every day. She even has to prepare breakfast and dinner for you. But you take the money and play around with a clear conscience. You don't work hard in your studies, you skip classes whenever you want, and you talk back to the teachers. You said that my life has been arranged and that it's meaningless to study and that it's a waste of my youth. What about you?" Wu Lingling never thought that Tang Guo would say these things to her. Moreover, there were people passing by. When they saw Wu Lingling being lectured by the model student, they all walked into the school with a smile, as if they had found something strange. Wu Lingling felt embarrassed. "What right do you have to control me? I spent my parents' money, not yours. Lingling, my mom doesn't want auntie to suffer too much. My mom paid for your school fees." Tang Guo frowned. "If my mother hadn't paid for your tuition, I wouldn't have cared about you. Don't think that our money comes from nothing. In order to earn money, my parents go on business trips every day. The degree of hardship they suffer is no less than youngest aunts. I'm saying all this because I feel sorry for my parents. They spent money on people like you who don't study hard and skip classes all day." The surrounding people were a little surprised. They only knew that the 3 good students of the high school were the cousin of the delinquent girl from the junior high school. Wu Lingling usually spent a lot of money, so they thought that Wu Lingling came from a good family. She had never expected that the money she spent was actually given by Tang Guo's mother. "Don't you know what your family is like? Since when did spending other people's money become so righteous? Lingling, you should be more sensible. Don't make me worry anymore. If you make me worry, then my mom has to worry for me. I really can't stand it. Who cares about your family's money?" Wu Lingling felt the strange gazes on her and shouted. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1373. Do you think I want it? It was eldest aunt who forced it into my arms. Lingling, so you don't want to spend my mother's money? Tang Guo smiled. How could she let Wu Lingling spend their family's money? Since she was here, she couldn't give a single cent to this ingrate. She might as well feed it to the dogs. "I didn't ask for it." Wu Lingling felt the suspicious gazes and said, "If auntie didn't give it to me, I wouldn't have asked for it. I'm just a junior high school student and I don't spend much. My mother gave me enough." Wu Lingling saw Tang Guo smile. She had to admit that this delicate-looking, fair-skinned senior high school student looked very attractive when she smiled. At the very least, the surrounding students felt very comfortable looking at her. Wu Lingling was dressed in strange clothes and her hair was permed. Perhaps she was afraid that the teacher would scold her, so her hair was casually tied up with a rubber band. "So Lingling is sensible now." Tang Guo breathed a sigh of relief and took out her phone. Under Wu Lingling's incredulous gaze, she called Mrs. Tang. Mrs. Tang said that she was very busy, but as long as Tang Guo called, she would pick up immediately, unless there was no signal or she was in a meeting. It was morning and it wasn't time for the meeting yet, so the call was picked up not long after. "Xiao Guo, what's wrong?" Tang Guo rarely made a phone call at this time, so Mother Tang asked nervously. "Nothing, Mom. I just saw Lingling at the school gate. I think Lingling is sensible now. She said that she will be good in the future and won't spend money recklessly. She also said that she won't let Mom give her money in the future. She has enough of what Auntie gave her. Really? Lingling really said that? Mrs. Tang was happy to hear this. Tang Guo glanced at Wu Lingling. Mom, I'll give the phone to Lingling and let her tell you personally. She's not lying. She said it in front of the surrounding students. Auntie gives her 50 yuan a day for lunch, stationery, and accessories as a junior high school student. That's enough. Mom, why don't you talk to Lingling? Wu Lingling was stunned when Tang Guo handed the phone to her. In the end, her hand trembled. Feeling the gazes around her, she braced herself and picked up the phone. Aunt. Lingling, is what Xiao Guo said true? Yes, Aunt, it's true. Wu Lingling felt Tang Guo's smiling expression. Of course, she couldn't deny what she said. Actually, her mother had no idea that her aunt had given her money. She didn't intend to tell her, and her aunt wouldn't tell her mother about such trivial matters. Although she didn't want to be looked down upon by Tang Guo. So, like pouring beans out of beans, she grumbled that she didn't need Mother Tang's money and told her not to give it to her in the future because she had enough to spend. Mrs. Tang asked several times, but Wu Lingling always said the same thing. In fact, her heart was bleeding. Mrs. Tang was generous and would give her at least a few hundred yuan a week, sometimes even a few thousand yuan. Now, it was all gone. She angrily returned the phone to Tang Guo. Cousin, don't think that everyone wants your stinky money, but I don't. Okay, I'm not spending Auntie's money now. You have no right to lecture me. Lingling, I'm very happy that you're so sensible. Tang Guo's lips curved and she left with a smile. Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1374. Wu Lingling looked on helplessly as Tang Guo bid her farewell with a smile and left. She was so angry that she felt stifled. Wasn't it just some stinky money? Her aunt had forced it on her. Did she think that she cared? Lingling, is your family really as difficult as your cousin said? The girl beside her sized up Wu Lingling's outfit. It looked like a strange outfit, but it was not cheap at all. For an ordinary student, a summer outfit would only cost 100 or 200 yuan. Including shoes, it would cost at most 300 yuan. But Wu Lingling's outfit was already more than 1,000 yuan. Usually, Wu Lingling spent money extravagantly. She had never told them about her family's situation. They thought that her family was quite rich. It's not that difficult. It's just that her family is too rich. Wu Lingling's face was a little hot as she said, "My mom is too hardworking. She clearly has a good salary for one job, but she insists on working 2 jobs. She can't even afford to eat and wear. It's a habit that she has developed since she was young." So that's the case. The student did not care about this and dragged the depressed Wu Lingling into the school. Tang Guo, on the other hand, was very comfortable. The high school classes were a piece of cake to her. Her performance was perfect. The students in the class and the teacher all realized that she seemed to have become more outstanding. Everyone smiled when they saw Tang Guo. Looking at her obedient and gentle appearance, they subconsciously spoke softly, afraid that they would disturb her. If you asked her any difficult questions, she would patiently answer them for you. God, she was simply an angel in their hearts. The system's heart was filled with goosebumps. The host was intentionally or unintentionally emitting an aura of affinity with souls. Was he really planning to make everyone fall head over heels for him? What was the host trying to do? The system was feeling uneasy the entire morning. Because everyone who had interacted with Tang Guo liked her very much. They all felt that she was an angel. In front of her, they were especially polite. Almost everywhere she went, people liked her. If the charm that she exuded had a form, it would definitely be seen that her charm had enveloped the entire classroom. During lunch, the system asked softly, "Dear host, what are you doing?" "Being a perfect person." "Is that so?" During lunch, Tang Guo also met Wu Lingling, who was eating in the canteen. When the other party saw her, his expression changed. Tang Guo greeted her with a gentle smile. "Lingling, you're eating in the cafeteria too?" Originally, Wu Lingling basically ate outside at noon in a restaurant. Every day, she would bring her friends to eat good food. Because of Tang Guo's appearance this morning, Tang Ning had lost a portion of her income. She still wanted to save face, so she wasn't thick-skinned enough to ask Mother Tang for money. Plus, if she accepted Mother Tang's money, she wouldn't be able to hold her head up high in front of Tang Guo. She was not going to be despised by a rigid and obedient girl who said that she was spending her family's money. "Can't I eat in the canteen?" Wu Lingling said unhappily. Tang Guo smiled faintly. "Of course not. You usually eat out in small restaurants. I thought you would be eating out today. Do you want to come over and eat?" "No, I'll go with my classmate." "Okay." No matter what Wu Lingling's attitude was, Tang Guo was always amiable. Originally, everyone had a good impression of Tang Guo, but when they saw Wu Lingling's impulsive attitude, they didn't like it. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1375. How could the food in the cafeteria compare to the food in the small restaurants? Those girls who were used to the food in the small restaurants were also dissatisfied. They were already suspecting that Wu Lingling's family background was not as good as what she said. Maybe it was just like what Tang Guo said, that she was just trying to keep up appearances. Tang Guo saw the expressions of the people at the opposite table clearly. If Wu Lingling did not spend their family's money, would she be able to make friends with a group of so-called loyal friends? Of course not. Therefore, Wu Lingling was using her family's money to make friends with all kinds of people outside. Now that she had no money, the number of people who could hang out with her would gradually decrease. She ate her food slowly. Even the way she ate was especially beautiful. Then, she looked at Wu Lingling. She did not sit properly or stand properly. She looked especially boorish. The contrast between the two of them was very obvious. Wu Lingling was actually a very sensitive person. Instantly, she felt that someone was looking at her and Tang Guo. She ate 2 mouthfuls and quickly left. She felt especially uncomfortable staying in that place. Tang Guo's lips curled into a smile. She just wanted to annoy Wu Lingling. She wanted to annoy her to death. All of Wu Lingling's concealment was because of her inferiority complex. As a result, after the original host encountered those things, her grades declined, and her temper became bad. She slowly became better, her studies improved, and she became clean and beautiful. Only then did she have the courage to stand in front of the original host. In fact, in front of the original host, who was an excellent student, she had always felt inferior. The first thing Tang Guo wanted to do was to always stand above Wu Lingling. She did not need to do anything. She only needed to be better than Wu Lingling in everything. Then, Wu Lingling would break down and never change for the better. Her eyes darkened. To hurt a person, hurt their heart first. To attack an enemy, attack their courage first. Wu Lingling did not have the courage to change for the better. After she realized that she could not be compared to Tang Guo in any way, she would naturally fall. Without Tang Guo as a stepping stone, how could she grow? Lu Jing. Tang Guo picked up a piece of vegetable and put it into her mouth, chewing slowly. What if Lu Jing was no longer valued by the Lu family? Could he still lead Wu Lingling to change? It was because Wu Lingling fell in love with Lu Jing and thought that she was not good enough for him that she slowly came to a realization and changed herself. If you like being a gangster, then be a gangster for life. The vegetables today are quite delicious. The classmate sitting next to Tang Guo heard what she said. Looking at her clean plate, he glanced at the vegetables he had put aside and didn't plan to eat. Suddenly, he felt that they looked quite delicious. Before Tang Guo left, she ate a few mouthfuls of vegetables and nodded. Tang Guo is right. Today's vegetables are really delicious. System, is that even possible? Tang Guo's life was very simple. Every day, she would go to school, finish school, eat, and sleep. Just like that, she came to this world for a week. There was still a week before that phone call. During this time, Wu Lingling and Lu Jing were in a passionate relationship. Mother Tang came back once, but she no longer gave Wu Lingling money or red packets. This was because she had personally come to the school to visit Wu Lingling. Tang Guo knew about this and accompanied Mrs. Tang to the hospital. Seeing that Wu Lingling had rejected Mother Tang's idea of giving her money, Tang Guo was very satisfied. Lingling is really sensible now. After Wu Lingling left, Mother Tang was in disbelief. Tang Guo stood at the side obediently and said, "Mom, are you relieved now?" "Yes, Lingling is sensible. I don't have to suffer so much anymore." Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1376. Tang Guo did not think that Wu Lingling's mother, who was also her youngest aunt, needed their help. The reason why they led such a bad life was because they had brought it upon themselves. Wu Lingling's father was a drunkard who did not do his job properly. When he was young, he was a hooligan. Wu Lingling's mother was so in love with this drunkard that she even married him in the end. Even now, Wu Lingling's mother was still in love with this drunkard who did not do his job properly and liked to act crazy. The only good thing about this drunkard was that when he was sober, he was very good at talking, coaxing his wife and admitting defeat. Every time he begged for mercy, Wu Lingling's mother would be soft-hearted. She knew that he would not change, but she would still forgive him. In fact, the reason why she worked 2 jobs was not for Wu Lingling, but for this drunkard. Wu Lingling's school fees were paid by Mother Tang. She even secretly gave Wu Lingling some pocket money. Wu Lingling's mother worked so hard just to support that drunkard. Wu Lingling's mother told everyone that she worked hard for Wu Lingling, and even Wu Lingling herself believed it. This made Mother Tang sympathize with her younger sister, so she helped them and paid for Wu Lingling's school fees. Because Wu Lingling's grades were not good enough for her to enter this junior high school. It was Mother Tang who spent the money and pulled strings. Later, the original Wu Lingling became evil and did something against Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling's mother often came to make trouble. In fact, because Wu Lingling was not sensible, she could not raise her head in front of Mother Tang. She was very happy that the original Wu Lingling became evil. "I have to think of a way to stop my mother from sponsoring Wu Lingling's school fees." Tang Guo sat by the desk and muttered to herself, which made the system tremble. The host was forcing Wu Lingling's family into a dead end. Nevertheless, it agreed with her. The host was a big family and had no obligation to sponsor Wu Lingling's family. Mother Tang, for example, felt sorry for her younger sister's man who did not live up to her expectations. It was not easy for her to raise her daughter alone. Little did she know that Wu Lingling's mother did not want to leave that man. It was not easy for the host. "Your mother was soft-hearted, especially towards her only younger sister. Is my younger sister more important than my daughter? Will my aunt starve to death immediately? No, right?" Tang Guo tried to recall the time and suddenly remembered that it was her birthday this Saturday. This Saturday, the day after tomorrow. Mrs. Tang and Mr. Tang would definitely come. Wu Lingling's family would also come. Their families lived close to each other. Tang Guo, a good student, was celebrating her 16th birthday. Not to mention those who were close to her, even those who were further away would come because her family was not bad. She already had an idea. However, the thought of receiving that call next week made her a little unhappy. Yes, when that happened, the original owner had just celebrated her 16th birthday a few days ago. "Host, after you came, everything changed. Right now, no one can bully you. If anyone dares to bully you, you can use all kinds of methods to retaliate. You can use the most satisfying way to take revenge." The system consoled him. Actually, he felt a little regretful because in the previous few worlds, the host's personality had slowly become more sunny. Ever since she received the storyline of this world, her entire person had become gloomy. She was all smiles. Her scheming look and the way she pretended to be polite with people really made his heart tremble. "Host, I feel that other than studying, you should go out more often. Who knows, you might even meet your cutie." Fupin Chinese Vertex. The family Tang auntie nodded and decided to get serious. Then, Tang Guo's uncle complained about her cousin's poor grades. Her cousin was only a month older than her and was in her first year of high school. Tang Guo thought for a moment. "Uncle, I remember that my cousin is quite good at drawing. Why don't you let her study art and take the art exam in the future? The girl who had been embarrassed suddenly raised her head and looked at Tang Guo in disbelief. She was a little surprised that this little cousin of hers who only knew how to study actually knew that she was good at drawing. Her grades for the art exam are much lower. As long as she is willing to study hard, she will definitely be able to get into a good school. Also, if she works hard in her interests, it will be easier for her to study. The family Tang uncle saw the joy in his daughter's eyes and was also thinking about it. System, host, what are you doing? Let everyone become outstanding together. I'm so good, what else can I do? The system trembled. Everyone was becoming outstanding, only Wu Lingling was getting worse, right? Damn it. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1378. After that, all the families complained about their children, saying that they could not compare to Tang Guo's results. Tang Guo was always able to accurately identify the strengths of these siblings and said that they should be nurtured in this area and learn what they were good at. She said that they would not be worse than those with good grades. Her peers, who were already very impressed with Tang Guo, looked at her differently. Those who were originally a little jealous of Tang Guo felt guilty for being so narrow-minded in the past when they heard her affirmation of what they were good at. They did not expect that in her heart, they were not worse than her at all. It turned out that she thought so highly of them. Not only that, Tang Guo also told her relatives and peers what they were good at, what direction they could develop in the future, and even talked about their job prospects. Her words of encouragement and recognition made these half-grown people of the same generation feel their blood boil, and they couldn't wait to do what they were good at. They would indeed feel bored if they only studied. Moreover, not everyone could be good at every subject. They would always be partial to certain subjects. For some subjects, no matter how hard they studied, they could only get so many marks. For some, no matter how hard they studied, they could not get into it. It was the same no matter who taught them. If they were forced to study, it would only make them hate studying. They were rejected by their parents every time. Suddenly, they were recognized by a very outstanding student. Their hearts were filled with unprecedented courage. Tang Guo looked at everyone around her. They were full of fighting spirit, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She remembered that her brothers and sisters had very ordinary lives later on. Most of the reason was because they were rejected by their families. After Tang Guo's collapse, Wu Lingling's awakening appeared. Wu Lingling's impact on them was the greatest. Wu Lingling was indeed very smart. She learned everything quickly. It could be said that after she came to her senses, she was really blessed. No matter what she did, she was the best. These pitiful siblings of hers originally had an area that they were good at. In the end, they were all defeated by Wu Lingling and could not raise their heads. Those who drew could not pick up their paintbrushes anymore. Those who studied music could not play their own feelings no matter how hard they tried. Her cousin, who was good at mathematics, was too biased in his subject. In addition, there was Wu Lingling, who was hot on his heels. In front of them, he was high and mighty, becoming the most dazzling and outstanding student among all the parents. What these parents said in front of them was that Wu Lingling had been so naughty back then, but now that she had turned around, she could learn so well. How could they not be compared to Wu Lingling? They all wondered if they were secretly fooling around in school. Children had self-esteem, and being denied by their own family was the most painful thing. Especially their own parents, who would always praise other people's children in front of them. It would make them feel uncomfortable. Over time, it would be even harder for them to study properly. Tang Guo didn't have to do anything but praise them. Everyone, as long as they weren't idiots, had their own areas of expertise. As long as they didn't have a problem with their IQ, and there were reasonable methods and serious nurturing, they would definitely be bad in the future. It would not be fun if only one person became outstanding. If they wanted to play, everyone should become outstanding together, leaving only Wu Lingling to fall. How interesting would that be? There was a clean smile on Tang Guo's face. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1379. The peers looked at the fair and clean little girl sitting in the middle, their faces full of gratitude. They were all thinking in their hearts that she was indeed the most outstanding girl among their peers. Her grades were good, her smile was beautiful, and her words were so pleasant. When the system saw this, it heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't want to see the host who was dyed black all over appear. What it wanted to see was the great host who yearned for the human world even after returning from hell. Even if the world was cold, it hoped that she could feel the warmth of the sun. It hoped that in every world, there would be a ray of sunlight that could shine on her body, so that she could feel the warmth of the world and be willing to yearn for a world with light. Little cousin, do you think there's any hope for me to be biased? Tangua said with a smile, if you want to get a high score, there may be no way. If you're biased towards science, choose the relevant questions to do and memorize the formulas and laws. When you do more questions and memorize the formulas, it's not a problem to pass. If you can't solve the difficult questions, you can solve the ones that can be solved. Don't waste time on the difficult questions. If it's language or English, then rely on memorization. If you only rely on your back, it's not a problem to pass. If it's composition, you can look at more examples to break through. Seeing that Tangua was so patient, everyone started to discuss how to study. When the parents saw this, they were not in the mood to compare their own children. Because the blueprint that Tangua drew for them really made them feel a little enlightened. Who didn't want their children to be outstanding? It turned out that their children were not outstanding, but they didn't realize what made them outstanding. In short, everyone was very happy. Until Wu Lingling's family came. When everyone's discussion ended, Wu Lingling followed behind her parents with an unwilling look. Everyone looked at each other, somewhat displeased with Wu Lingling. Today was Tangua's birthday. What did she mean by showing an unwilling look in someone else's house? Of course, Mr. Tang and Mrs. Tang were more magnanimous people. They wouldn't argue with the child. Mrs. Tang was still smiling as she welcomed Qin Ruolan, who was Wu Lingling's mother, and Wu Jun, that drunkard, who was Wu Lingling's father, to come in. Wu Jun chose to sit in the position of a group of men and began to brag to those people. Qin Ruolan went to the kitchen to help Mrs. Tang. Wu Lingling was alone. She sat at the side and did not interact with her peers. She held the remote control and changed the channel. Tangua smiled and said, "Lingling, come and sit down." "No, I'll sit here. It's more spacious here." Wu Lingling didn't appreciate it. Tangua had no intention of letting him go. She continued to smile faintly as she chatted and laughed with the people around her. Wu Lingling frowned. She didn't like the way Tangua was worshipped. Moreover, those people did not talk to her. She despised them in her heart. These people just looked down on her because her family was not as rich as Tangua's family. Her father was an alcoholic and her mother worked 2 ordinary jobs. And her results were not as good as Tangua's. These people were snobbish at such a young age. She did not want to play with them. Wu Lingling looked like she was full of thorns. No one went to ask for a snub. Instead, they continued to discuss with Tangua about their studies. At this moment, Qin Ruolan, who was Wu Lingling's mother, came out of the kitchen and saw Wu Lingling randomly pressing the remote control. Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1380. She said, "Lingling, everyone is discussing how to study. You should also learn from your cousin Xiao Guo. You're all from the same school. If you have any problems, you can ask Xiao Guo. Auntie is right. If Lingling has any problems, you can ask me." Tangua agreed readily. She really didn't do anything deliberately. Wu Lingling's mother had started it, but Wu Lingling couldn't stand it when she heard these words. "Mom, don't meddle in my business." Wu Lingling frowned and slammed the remote control on the coffee table. In fact, Wu Lingling and Qin Ruolan were not on good terms. It should be said that children in the rebellious stage would never oppose their parents. Qin Ruolan was a little angry. "Your cousin Xiaoguo's grades are so good. Everyone is studying with her, but you're the only one who's messing around with the remote control. No wonder your grades can't improve. It's none of your business." Wu Lingling was also angry. Why do you keep talking about Xiao Guo and Xiao Guo? Mom, am I your daughter, or is Xiao Guo your daughter? If you like her so much, why don't you just acknowledge her as your daughter? I'm worse than her in everything. What's the point of studying every day? She's so rigid. When she enters society in the future, she might not even know how to take care of herself. Usually, Wu Lingling wouldn't say so much. Today, Qin Ruolan was anxious when she saw everyone discussing studying with Tang Guo. She had always hoped that Wu Lingling could surpass Tang Guo and become her pride. In the future, Wu Lingling would be able to enter a good university and win glory for her. Moreover, if she went to a good university, she would have a good job and she would be able to survive. However, Wu Lingling was disobedient and even talked back to her face. This made her very embarrassed. Wu Lingling was also embarrassed by her mother's words in public. The mother and daughter didn't get along. Even though it was Tang Guo's birthday today, Wu Lingling was just a third-year junior high school girl who didn't know the ways of the world. She quarreled on the spot. Even Mrs. Tang, who had a good temper, had an ugly expression on her face. Mr. Tang also frowned, but because Wu Lingling was Qin Ruolan's daughter and was still a child, as adults, they really couldn't scold someone else's child. Mrs. Tang, on the other hand, was a little disappointed. Didn't Ling Ling seem more mature before? Why is her temper even more unreasonable than before? Qin Ruolan knew that Wu Lingling's words would ruin Tang Guo's birthday. She hurriedly said, "Lingling, why are you so insensible? Today is your cousin Xiao Guo's birthday. How can you say that? Hurry up and apologize." This time, Wu Lingling's firecracker was really ignited. "What about me? It's all because you keep comparing me to her. Her grades are so good. If you like her, you might as well take her as your daughter. I've embarrassed you, so you can kick me out of the house." At this moment, everyone's gazes landed on Wu Lingling's face, causing her face to burn. It was impossible for her to admit her mistake in public. "Lingling, stop fooling around. Today is Xiao Guo's birthday." Mrs. Tang suppressed the anger in her heart. "We'll be eating soon. Go wash your hands. It's not like I wanted to make a scene. It's my mother's fault for being so nosy." Wu Lingling muttered. She wasn't whispering, so everyone heard her. "If there's anyone to blame, it's my mother's fault for always comparing me to my cousin. She's different from my cousin. She likes to study rigidly. That's her business. I like to be free and do what I like while I'm still young. It's not like I'm stopping you guys." Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1381. Why do you always want me to study with her? What's so good about studying every day? Wu Lingling was angry, so she expressed her thoughts without thinking. Qin Ruolan couldn't stop her. Besides, studying might not be useful. Didn't you see the news? Those students from famous schools are already so old, but they still don't know how to wash clothes. Wu Lingling lifted her chin and said to Mother Tang, "Auntie, I remember that you hired a helper to help clean the house, cook and wash clothes for cousin Xiao Guo. Don't tell me she doesn't know how to do that. So what's the use of studying?" Qin Ruolan's face was about to crack. Mother Tang felt the same way. At this moment, she suddenly felt that taking care of Wu Lingling was a waste of energy and money. She didn't think that in Wu Lingling's heart, her precious daughter was so unbearable. Everyone else looked at each other, thinking that Wu Lingling was very insensible. Tang Guo didn't say a word, but many of her peers spoke up. Among them was the cousin who had asked her a question. He said, "Lingling, today is cousin Xiao Guo's birthday. Stop fooling around. We didn't force you to study if you don't want to. If there's anything, can't you discuss it with your mother at home? Yeah, cousin Xiao Guo only celebrates her birthday once a year. It's not good to make a scene." Wu Lingling's face turned red. She wanted to refute, but there were so many people looking at her as if she was wrong. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to rush out of the room. Qin Ruolan saw that Mother Tang and Father Tang's expressions weren't right and felt bad. She quickly said, "Lingling, apologize to your auntie and cousin Xiao Guo. How can you say that? Don't you know how much your auntie has helped us? Don't forget that your auntie was the one who paid for your school fees and school fees. When Wu Lingling heard this, she felt as if all her clothes had been stripped off. Especially when she saw Tangua's calm gaze, she suddenly remembered what happened that morning. That day, she said confidently that she didn't want to spend Tangua's money anymore and that she had no right to meddle in her affairs. Now that Qin Ruolan had pointed out to her face that her junior high school tuition fees and school selection fees had all come from Mother Tang, she instantly felt humiliated. That pitiful pride of his was suddenly exposed. I didn't ask her to give it to me. She did it willingly. My grades weren't good to begin with, but you guys insisted on sending me to the best junior high school. All of this was arranged by you guys. What I hate the most is having my life arranged by others. Wu Lingling pursed her lips and said, Mom, transfer me to another school. I don't want to study in that school. Also, we'll pay for the school fees ourselves. We won't spend a single cent from them. Lingling. Qin Ruolan was unable to restrain herself from slapping Wu Lingling's face. Even Wu Jun, who didn't care much about the school affairs, stood up and scolded when he heard this. Girl, why are you so insensible? Your aunt has paid for your tuition. Why are you so insensible? Hurry up and apologize to your aunt. I didn't do anything wrong. She was the one who wanted to help me attend that junior high school. Now, she's using this to threaten me. I'm not cousin Xiao Guo. I'm not under her control. Wu Lingling pushed the two of them away, opened the door, and ran out. This place was too oppressive. She didn't want to stay here at all. These people were all snobs. They just looked down on her. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1382. She was the poorest among the people here, so they all came to laugh at her family. Now everyone knew that it was Tangua's family who paid for her tuition. How could she raise her head in the future? Moreover, she didn't want this. Her mother always asked her to study with Tangua. Was it fun? Didn't her aunt pay for her tuition? Did she have to lower her head and admit her mistake in front of Tangua? She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't like to study. So what? The system was dumbfounded at all this. The host didn't do anything. How could Wu Lingling make things so bad? The host didn't say much during the whole process, right? People with low self-esteem would either suppress their emotions and suffocate themselves in such a situation, or they would erupt and show their ferocious side to everyone. Tangua said to the system, I didn't do anything. I just made the people around me better. Most of the people in the fallen abyss don't think about how to climb out. They just want to drag the people above down. Those who don't want to come down are all enemies. I just returned some of her sufferings to her. It depends on whether she wants to climb out or hate the people above her as enemies. Our family doesn't have the obligation to pay for all her expenses. Aunt, your life is so miserable now. She asked for it. There's no reason for our family to pay for it. Don't take my family's money and act high and mighty, thinking that my family is begging her. Since you're so noble and don't care, don't spend a penny of our family's money. Tangua had a very clean smile on her face. Wu Jun had gone out to chase Wu Lingling. No matter what, he had to bring her back. It wouldn't look good if she continued to make trouble. Xiaoguo, I'm really sorry. Lingling is too immature. Qin Ruolan also felt embarrassed. Sister, look at Lingling. She's still young and immature. Aunt, I don't mind Lingling making trouble on my birthday. After all, she's still a child. Tangua pursed her lips and said hesitantly, but what she said today really made me very sad. Qin Ruolan was a little helpless. Then I'll apologize to you, okay? It's not your fault. Why should I apologize to you? Auntie, I've already said that I don't mind how Lingling treats me, but I'm a little unhappy that she treated my mother like that. No one expected this to be what she was going to say. They were all very willing to listen to this seemingly sensible and well-behaved girl speak a few words. Especially those who had been praised by her for their children before. My parents work so hard every day. Even though they earn a lot, they're either in meetings or on their way to meetings to help Lingling. That's because my mother cares about Auntie. Qin Ruolan hurriedly nodded to show that she understood. But Lingling's words are really disappointing. I feel bad for my mother. Auntie, I think Lingling has never experienced the hardships of life. She's been spoiled. The corners of Tangua's lips curved slightly, and she said seriously, you don't know how hard life is because you haven't experienced it before. Auntie, please go home and talk to Lingling. Auntie, you too. You have 2 jobs. I feel sorry for you. If Lingling were more sensible, you wouldn't have to worry so much. Qin Ruolan, who was angered by her daughter just now, also felt warm in her heart. Yes, if Lingling were more sensible, she wouldn't have to worry. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1383. She thought that it would be great if such a well-behaved child belonged to her. She didn't have to worry about anything, could talk, and had good grades. I'll talk to Lingling when we get home. Qin Ruolan sighed. I'm really sorry for Xiaoguo today. Auntie, don't say that. We're a family. It's just a tantrum. It's nothing. Tangua's sensible look made Mrs. Tang and Mr. Tang feel sorry for her. She was their precious daughter. She was scolded by Wu Lingling in such a way, but she still acted amicably in order to save face between relatives. They were a little angry when they heard Wu Lingling's words. At that time, Mrs. Tang wanted to say directly, since Wu Lingling doesn't care about it, then don't spend her money so righteously. She felt that her concern over the years was really fed to a dog. To think that Xiaoguo even said that Wu Lingling had become more sensible. She felt that the girl was just pretending. Host, Wu Lingling was brought back by Wu Jun. The system reminded her. Tangua smiled in her heart and said to Qin Ruolan, Auntie, don't worry about the tuition fees. Lingling probably said it out of anger. My mom won't mind. As long as she's sensible, it's okay for me to help you pay for the tuition fees since you and my mom are sisters. Xiaoguo is really too sensible. Qin Ruolan's eyes reddened. If I had the ability, I wouldn't have troubled you. She was relieved. The others didn't mind either. In fact, as Wu Lingling said, Wu Lingling's family was the poorest. If Qin Ruolan hadn't dug her own grave, she wouldn't have had such a poor life. Who cares about her family's money? Who wants her fake kindness? Qin Ruolan didn't expect that Wu Lingling would hear this and rush in angrily. She pointed at Tangua and scolded, Tangua, how dare you sow discord here? Are you trying to pull my mom into your team? Wu Lingling ran out. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that something was wrong. She remembered that everyone was standing on Tangua's side. Everyone was looking at her with eyes full of blame and dislike. After coming back with Wu Jun, they heard Tangua's arrogant words at the door. She didn't want Qin Ruolan to worry about the tuition. Her mother even put on a grateful look, as if she couldn't wait to treat Tangua as her own daughter. It really pissed her off. I don't want you to pay for my tuition, Wu Lingling said bitterly. You are a hypocrite. You did it on purpose. You deliberately drew everyone to your side, didn't you? You want everyone to stand on your side so that they can mess with me, right? Just because I'm different and you don't like me, you want to use this method to make me feel grateful to you, worship you, and revolve around you like everyone else? In your dreams. It was over. These were the thoughts of Qin Ruolan and Wu Jun. They had already seen Father Tang and Mother Tang's undisguised darkening faces. Lingling, you. Tangua looked harmless, but in Wu Lingling's eyes, she was like a blooming white lotus. Wu Lingling was right. She was playing the role of the most beautiful white lotus in the world right now. After all, many people fell for this trick. Lingling, what are you talking about? Qin Ruolan really exploded. She slapped Wu Lingling's face again. Wu Lingling was slapped in the face. She covered her face and said loudly, I can't afford it. I won't go to that school, I won't come here again, and I won't spend a single cent of her family's money. This time, Wu Lingling really left. Fupin Chinese The Summit. Chapter 1384. Sister, I'm really sorry, Qin Ruolan apologized. I'm really sorry, Xiao Guo. Lingling is too insensible. Mrs. Tang didn't intend to forgive her anymore. Her expression didn't look good. Ruolan, since Lingling hates our help so much, let's just forget about it. Lingling is your precious daughter, and Xiao Guo is also my precious daughter. We don't have much time to spend with Xiao Guo because we want to earn more money and give her a better life. Mrs. Tang thought of Wu Lingling's hateful look just now and wondered if she had taught her daughter too well. How could she be so polite after being scolded by Wu Lingling? Xiao Guo has always been very sensible. Before, when Lingling criticized Xiao Guo many times, I just thought that she was being insensible and that it was just a small dispute between children. I didn't take it seriously. But Wu Lingling's scary look just now scared her. It was as if she was begging her to pay for Wu Lingling's school fees. That look of disdain really made her feel as if she had eaten a fly. She was an ingrate. If she wasn't Qin Ruolan's daughter, she wouldn't even look at her. She finally understood that Wu Lingling's character was probably inherited from that bastard Wu Jun. After all, they were father and daughter. But you saw Lingling's look just now, right? She's only 1 year younger than Xiao Guo. She should be more sensible, Mrs. Tang said. Let's not be calculative about what happened in the past. Ruolan, you have to take care of your daughter from now on. We can't help you. What could Qin Ruolan say in front of so many people that she didn't have money and didn't want to pay for Wu Lingling's school fees? She wasn't shameless enough to ask Mrs. Tang for money in front of everyone. In the past, it was always Mrs. Tang who took the initiative to give her money because she cared about her. She had never asked for it. She could only nod her head painfully. Sister, I'll go back and teach Lingling well. This won't happen again. On this birthday, everyone else felt that it was unfair for Tang Guo. Qin Ruolan sat at the side and didn't look good. What Wu Lingling had done today had utterly disgraced her. Now even her elder sister was not willing to pay for the tuition. She scolded Wu Lingling several times in her heart. She was really too insensible. Qin Ruolan was Mrs. Tang's younger sister. Seeing that Mrs. Tang had made that decision, his expression became slightly better. With so many people around, it wouldn't look good if things got out of hand. He planned to talk to Mrs. Tang about Qin Ruolan after everyone left. On this birthday, Tang Guo was probably the happiest person in the world. Wasn't driving away Wu Lingling, the vampire, something to be happy about? Wu Lingling was self-abased, rebellious, and prideful. She would never come to their house to ask for money. After the relatives left, Mrs. Tang and Mr. Tang looked at each other and walked up to Tang Guo. Xiao Guo, don't worry about Lingling in the future, Mrs. Tang said. Don't learn from her either, in case she affects you. Mrs. Tang felt a little guilty. I was thinking of asking you to take care of her since you are cousins. I didn't expect her to be so insensible and ungrateful. Forget it. Mom, are we really not going to care about anything? Mrs. Tang thought of Wu Lingling's words and felt terrible. I don't care anymore. Xiao Guo, tell me honestly. What has Lingling been doing in school? Actually, it's nothing much. She just doesn't like to study. She often skips classes and goes out to play with her friends. I tried to persuade her a few times, but she doesn't listen. The Peak. Chapter 1385. Friends outside. Mrs. Tang and Mr. Tang were not fools. They immediately understood that Wu Lingling was hanging out with those hooligans. They did not intend to let Tang Guo interfere with Wu Lingling's affairs. Now that they heard that she was hanging out with hooligans, they broke out in cold sweat. Were those hooligans good people? What if their daughter got involved because of Wu Lingling? Xiao Guo, you have to stay away from Wu Lingling in the future. Mr. Tang said seriously, we can't control her, but you have to remember that those hooligans don't learn well. Most of them are not good people. Don't learn from her. Dad, Mom, don't worry. The chauffeur sends me to school every day. Why would I learn from Lingling? Besides, Lingling is still young. She will understand in the future. Understand? They expressed their doubts. How many junior high school girls were hanging out with those hooligans? They didn't learn well, dropped out of school, and had abortions. They were really glad that they arranged a chauffeur for her because they were worried about her. But they did not know that even if they arranged a chauffeur, there were still ways to do anything to Tang Guo. Especially those hooligans who had some skills. They could use some simple questions and they wouldn't be able to answer Tang Guo. Anyway, Xiao Guo, don't hang out with Lingling in the future. Do you understand? Mr. Tang's tone softened. We will try to find more time to come back and accompany you. It was also because of Wu Lingling that they realized that their daughter was really too obedient. If she ended up like Wu Lingling, they would not be able to find anyone to cry to. Okay, I will listen to you. This was exactly what Tang Guo wanted. She cut off Mother Tang's thoughts and never extended a helping hand to pay Wu Lingling's tuition fees again. Also, she wanted them to take the initiative to stop meddling in Wu Lingling's affairs. After all, the original owner of the body gave Wu Lingling money because of their instructions. Otherwise, they would not have cared. No matter what, it was tens of thousands of yuan. If not for their instructions, who would have given her tens of thousands of yuan for no reason? Xiao Guo, go to bed first. Tang Guo left obediently. Obviously, the two of them still had something to discuss. She had achieved her goal today, so she went to bed in a good mood. Time passed quickly. Finally, it was the day when Tang Guo received Wu Lingling's call for help. After school in the afternoon, she finished her homework and prepared to go home. At this time, there were not many people in the school. When she passed by the school lake, she deliberately dropped her phone on the road and pretended that nothing had happened as she walked forward. Wu Lingling called her. She couldn't possibly hang up, right? If she hung up on purpose and something happened, she would definitely be blamed. Therefore, dropping the phone was the best solution. Who knew that the phone would drop so coincidentally? The fact that it had fallen into the school and someone had picked it up proved that it had nothing to do with her. It was Wu Lingling who was unlucky. However, before she could take more than 2 steps, she heard a refreshing voice behind her. Classmate, you dropped your phone. Tang Guo, system. Ha 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 ha, who is this? Why is he trying to undermine the host? Tang Guo's expression turned sinister for a moment. She turned around and flashed a clean smile. Then, she saw a sunny boy walking in front of her. Classmate, is this your phone? Tang Guo met the boy's gentle eyes and denied it. No. Classmate, I saw your phone fall out of your pocket. You can check it, the boy said seriously to Tang Guo, as if he had really seen it. The system laughed like crazy. Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1386. Classmate. It's not mine. Tang Guo denied. I didn't bring my phone today. But, Qiao Ji said seriously, I really saw this phone fall out of your pocket. As he spoke, he lit up the phone and showed her the password screen. Why don't you try your password? If you can unlock it, it's definitely yours. Also, there's a contact list and all kinds of accounts. You'll know once you take a look. System, ha 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 ha, you'll know once you take a look at the account numbers, honest person. Qiao Ji felt that this fair-skinned young lady was a little silly. Any normal person would take a look to see if the phone was hers or not, right? She, on the other hand, directly denied it and even said that she didn't bring her phone. Qiao Ji frowned. Classmate, what do you think? If you can't remember the password, you can use your fingerprint. System, ha 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 ha, you can even use your fingerprint. Tang Guo's expression was conflicted. Seeing that time was slowly passing, she didn't want to waste any more time with this retard. She snatched the phone from his hand and used her fingerprint to unlock it. Look, classmate, it's yours. Qiao Ji's expression seemed to say, I didn't see wrongly, it really fell out of your pocket. Do you believe me now? This almost made Tang Guo throw the phone at his head. Tang Guo put the phone in her pocket. Okay, it's mine. Thank you, kind person. You're welcome. Returning the money you find is a traditional virtue of our country. Qiao Ji revealed a row of neat and white teeth. His smile was especially bright. It's my honor to be able to help you. It's not early anymore, classmate, you can go home. Bye-bye. Tangwa turned to leave. She wanted to find a place where no one could see her and throw the phone away. Unexpectedly, that guy was actually following her. She turned around and stopped. What else do you want? After saying that, she took out her wallet and raised her eyebrows. Do you want a reward? 200 yuan, is that enough? No, classmate, you misunderstood. Qiao Ji waved his hand. I don't want a reward. Then why are you following me? Qiao Ji said very kindly, it's almost 7. It's not safe for a girl to go home alone. It's a little chaotic outside the school. At this time, there are a lot of hooligans loitering around. I'll send you to the bus stop. System, host, you're a kind-hearted person. You seem to have a good heart. There weren't many boys like him nowadays. Outside the school was indeed a gathering place for hooligans. Especially around the school, there were various alleys. Those hooligans liked to play in the alleys when they had nothing better to do. They bullied students and demanded protection fees. No need, my driver is waiting for me at the school gate. Then I'll send you to the school gate. System, ha 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 ha, no need. Tangwa raised her head and said very seriously to Qiao Ji, if a lot of people see me walking so close to a boy, they'll start gossiping. Now that I'm focused on my studies, if people start gossiping about me being in a relationship, it will affect my studies. So, thank you for your kindness. Tangwa's face revealed a faint smile. But I really don't want to be misunderstood and affect my studies and reputation. Qiao Ji felt that what she said really made sense. After hearing about being tortured, he really couldn't continue following her. He just felt that she didn't seem normal. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1387. How could he not remember what his phone looked like? Was it because his memory was not very good? Would he get lost? Qiao Ji was a little worried. It seemed that she really didn't want him to follow her. He didn't want to force her to misunderstand. Then, classmate, I won't follow you. You can go home. Tangwa nodded, turned around, and walked towards the school gate. Sure enough, the other party didn't follow her. She turned a corner and glanced at the school's small ditch. A smile appeared on her face as she threw the phone directly into the ditch. She watched as the phone was submerged in the ditch. The phone wasn't waterproof and would be destroyed after soaking for a while. She was in a very good mood and walked quickly towards the school gate. So she threw it on purpose. Qiao Ji watched as Tangwa's figure disappeared and put down the binoculars in his hand. At this moment, he was standing at the location of a school building. He was at a higher position and could see the road to the school gate. He wanted to see if the girl would get lost. After all, she didn't seem to have a good memory and didn't believe that the phone was hers. He didn't expect to see her throw the phone into the ditch through the binoculars. She seemed to be quite happy. Could it be that the stress of studying is too great and throwing the phone can relieve it? Qiao Ji thought that it was possible. After all, she said that there was a driver waiting for her at the school gate. It seemed that her family background was quite good. He took the binoculars and went to the ditch. He saw an exquisite phone lying in it. He picked it up and looked at it. The phone was destroyed and couldn't be turned on. After thinking about it, he still put it in the teacher's office. If her parents asked and blamed her, he could help say that the phone was found at school. Host, that guy really picked up the phone. You really have good foresight. Host, how did you know that he would secretly observe you? At this point, the system suddenly stopped. Host, was it that guy? Yes. No wonder the host wanted to throw the phone into the ditch. She was afraid that guy would find it and ruin the host's plans. Okay, let's go back. Host, where's that guy? I think he's a little stupid. I don't want to talk to him for now. System, alright, it seems like I was a little silly and almost ruined the host's plan. However, he didn't think that his host was such a petty person. It was just that she didn't have time to deal with the other party and was just casually finding an excuse. After all, today was an important day. The host couldn't bring himself to be happy. Tang Guo walked out of the school gate and got on the bus at 6:50. It was 7:20 p.m. when the car arrived at the house. Wu Lingling called her at 7:50 p.m. At this time, under normal circumstances, the students should have returned home. As for Wu Lingling, she was a rebellious delinquent girl. Of course, she wouldn't go home so early. Qin Ruolan didn't care much about Wu Lingling. Many people became gangsters because their families didn't care enough about them. Tang Guo had finished her homework. She went home, had dinner, washed up, and went to bed early. Her phone had been thrown into the ditch and was broken. Wu Lingling couldn't call her phone at all. So, what would happen to Wu Lingling? No matter what happened, it had nothing to do with her. It was a night without a phone. Tang Guo slept exceptionally well. Seeing Tang Guo's attitude, the system didn't monitor Wu Lingling's questions. Fupin Chinese The Peak. Chapter 1388. The next day, Tang Guo took the bus to school as usual. She opened the door and got out of the car. Usually, at this time, Wu Lingling and a few other delinquent girls would be riding their bicycles from the other direction. If it wasn't for special circumstances, they would basically meet each other every day. It wasn't that they met each other on purpose. It was just that both parties came at the same time, so it was normal for them to meet. But today, Wu Lingling didn't appear. Only those delinquent girls were there. When Tang Guo got out of the car, those delinquent girls were still whispering to each other. They seemed to be saying that Wu Lingling didn't meet them according to the schedule today. When I passed by Lingling's house, I called out to the second floor, but there didn't seem to be anyone there. Maybe she's dead asleep. Tang Guo chewed on her bread and followed them in. The morning was almost over. When the third period ended, the teacher had just walked out of the classroom less than 2 minutes ago. Before the students could react, a figure suddenly rushed into the classroom. By the time they saw clearly, the figure was already in front of Tang Guo. She glared at Tang Guo with a ferocious and vicious face. "You did it on purpose, didn't you? Lingling?" Tang Guo looked up and asked in confusion, "What's wrong? What do you mean on purpose?" Wu Lingling looked as if she wanted to eat Tang Guo up. "Did you do it on purpose? You did it on purpose, didn't you? Yesterday, you did it on purpose, didn't you?" Wu Lingling's incoherent words confused everyone. They all recalled yesterday. Wasn't Tang Guo the last to leave the classroom after finishing her homework? Moreover, during this period, Tang Guo didn't seem to have done anything wrong to Wu Lingling. "Lingling, what exactly are you talking about?" Tang Guo smiled faintly. "If there's nothing important, I still have to do my homework. This is a classroom, not a place to make a scene. If there's anything, we can talk about it after school." "No." Wu Lingling roared and smashed her fist heavily on Tang Guo's desk. Her fierce look made everyone in the class dislike her. "This student, you have already affected our studies. This is not a place for you to quarrel and mess around. Please leave. Classmate, please leave." They all knew Wu Lingling. She was a delinquent girl who skipped classes every day and was punished to stand. You've been on the news many times, and you've been criticized, but you still refuse to change. They were in the elite class of the first year of high school. They especially didn't like this kind of junior high school students who skipped class every day and shouted in their class. They didn't have any manners at all. "Tang Guo, just how much do you hate me? Why didn't you pick up my phone yesterday? Why did you turn off your phone? Why?" Wu Lingling's crumbling appearance caused everyone in the class to whisper to each other. They didn't think that Tang Guo would bully Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling must have done something wrong and blamed Tang Guo for it. This kind of person was really annoying. Wasn't it up to the owner of the phone whether to answer the call or not? Perhaps Tang Guo was busy with her studies and didn't notice. Wu Lingling, right? Tang Guo accidentally dropped her phone yesterday. She's already put it on the lost and found list. If you had something urgent yesterday and she didn't pick up your phone, then you can't blame her. Tang Guo's deskmate almost said, "You're really unlucky." Why did you run to the classroom and make a scene just because Tanguo didn't pick up your phone? You really have no manners at all. Wu Lingling was stunned. You lost your phone? Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1389. Yes, I only found out when I got home yesterday. Since you lost your phone, why didn't you find it immediately? The onlookers thought that Wu Lingling would feel sorry for misunderstanding Tanguo after hearing that Tanguo had lost her phone. Who would have thought that she would blame Tanguo for not finding it immediately? How shameless was she? When I found it, it was already dark and the chauffeur had already gone home. Do you want a little girl like me to look for her phone with a flashlight? Tanguo said calmly. Lingling, what happened yesterday? Did you call me? Yesterday. Wu Lingling remembered what had happened yesterday and quickly stopped talking. How could she say such a thing out loud? If she said it out loud, she would be ruined. She couldn't say it out loud. If she said it out loud, what would the people in school think of her? If she had known this would happen, she wouldn't have come to this school. If her mother hadn't said that she had already paid for the third year of junior high school and that she had to finish junior high school no matter what, she would have transferred to another school immediately. If she wanted to blame someone, she could only blame her aunt for paying for her junior high school fees. And her mother. If she had agreed to transfer to another school immediately, none of those things would have happened yesterday. And Lu Jing. Why didn't he pick up his phone? If he had picked up her phone, she would have been fine. And Tanguo. Yes, it was Tanguo. If she hadn't lost her phone, why would she have picked up her call to give her money and rescue her? Then she wouldn't have been bullied by those hooligans. She almost broke down when she thought of the scene last night and this morning. Although she was a delinquent, she still cared about some things. Besides, the person she liked was Lu Jing. How could she have fooled around with other hooligans? It's all your fault. Wu Lingling looked at Tanguo with hatred. You must have lost your phone on purpose, right? Of all times, you just had to lose it yesterday. No matter what had happened yesterday, Wu Lingling's words sounded shameless in everyone's ears. What did she mean by that? Of all times, she just had to lose it now? Did she have to inform you when she lost her phone? Tanguo doesn't have the ability to predict the future. How can she know what kind of emergency you have? Besides, what happened to you has nothing to do with Tanguo. Lingling, you really can't blame me for losing your phone. Can you tell me what happened yesterday? Tanguo asked kindly. Wu Lingling thought of the scene yesterday again. She looked at Tanguo even more fiercely. I won't forgive you. You just can't bear to see me doing well. Wu Lingling, please get out. Some of the fiercer female students in the class could not stand such a shameless person. They grabbed Wu Lingling's hair and dragged her out. Shameless. How dare you make a scene in our class? Tanguo is a good student. She is really unlucky to have a relative like you. These girls were also the type that messed around. However, they were different from Wu Lingling. Even though they messed around, their grades were still relatively good. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to enter the elite class. A delinquent in junior high actually dared to make a scene in their class. She even wanted to bully their good student. That wouldn't do. Tanguo was usually very patient with them. It was not Wu Lingling's turn to make a scene in front of her. Throw her out. The big sister in the class waved her hand. Chapter 1390. Okay, Tanguo, study hard. If this kind of shameless girl comes to class again, we'll help you throw her out, the class leader said with a smile. By the way, are you free at noon? I have a few math questions to ask you. Yes, I'll come to the classroom after lunch. You're welcome to come and discuss at any time. The leader was sitting in the row in front of Tanguo. She turned around and said, I think your cousin's gaze is a little strange. Be careful. Why don't you have lunch with us at noon? Okay. You're too honest. Even if she's your cousin, you can't always give in to her, the leader said with a sigh. Big Sis sighed and said, forget it. You're so skinny and gentle. I don't think you'll be able to do anything to her. If someone comes to find trouble with you in the future, just talk to your classmates. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Recently, we have a lot of questions that we don't understand in class. It's all thanks to you. This leader was actually quite a nice person. She was the leader because she was often bullied in the past, so she had to be fierce. Her dream was very bright. She wanted to go to a good university. Her family was not well off. She could only rely on her own efforts and studies to change her fate. What she admired the most were students with good academic results. After the last class in the morning, the leader took Tang Guo to the cafeteria. She was very polite and said that she would help her get food. Tang Guo gave her her meal card, but she quickly said that it was not necessary. Use mine. I feel that there's something wrong with my cousin, Tang Guo said in a low voice. If she really comes to harass me every day, I'll have to trouble you guys. Okay, I won't stand on ceremony. The leader's family was indeed not very good. She knew that Tang Guo did not lack food and asked her for help. In the future, she would be responsible for Tang Guo's safety in school. Not long after Tang Guo sat down, Wu Lingling appeared. As soon as she saw Tang Guo, the hatred in her eyes never faded. I don't know what happened yesterday. Lingling hates me so much. I just dropped my phone. I didn't expect her to call me so urgently. Hearing Tang Guo's words, the big sister frowned. Why do you care so much? No matter what happens, it's not your fault. She was the one who caused all the trouble. Oh, just because you lost your phone and didn't pick it up, you have to be blamed for something that happened to her? You're not her mother. If there's a problem with an underage student, it's her parents' responsibility. As his cousin, it's enough for you to do this. Really? It's true. Hurry up and eat. It's not your fault. You haven't even found your phone, right? After we're done eating, let's go back to the classroom to discuss the questions. You should stay away from this kind of ingrate cousin. Big sister felt that this good student of theirs was really too honest. They had to keep an eye on her so that she wouldn't be bullied by a bully like Wu Lingling. She heard that Tang Guo's family had helped Wu Lingling's family a lot. System. The host is so good at pretending to be a white lotus. She's so fucking annoying. During the meal, Tang Guo could feel Wu Lingling's hate-filled gaze. Actually, she wanted to laugh. See, if she picked up the phone, she would be the one to suffer. If she didn't pick up the phone, Wu Lingling would be the one to suffer. However, Wu Lingling would put the blame on her. This was the meaning of the saying, when you raise rice, you give it grace and hate it when you don't. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1391. Because her family had helped Wu Lingling's family too much, she felt that if there was any problem, her family would be the best choice. If her family couldn't help, or if there was any delay, then it would be her family's fault. Her parents had told her to take care of Wu Lingling. Wu Lingling had often borrowed money from Tang Guo. The original owner recalled Mother Tang's words, and her family didn't lack money. She didn't like to talk too much with Wu Lingling, so she simply borrowed money. This was also the reason why Wu Lingling would call her immediately when she thought of money. In the afternoon, when they were discussing questions, a pleasant voice suddenly sounded from outside the classroom. Excuse me, is Tang Guo in this class? When Tang Guo heard this familiar voice, she raised her head and coincidentally met the big boy standing at the door. System. He actually came looking for her. This guy is really like a sticky candy. After meeting the great host, he's completely broken. Tang Guo, he's looking for you. Tang Guo stood up and walked to the door with a faint smile. Big brother, may I know why you're looking for me? Big brother? Indeed, Tang Guo looked small and skinny, while Qiao Ji was 1.8 meters tall. Standing in front of her, he was practically blocking her light. Qiao Ji recovered from the sweet big brother and smiled at Tang Guo. Little sister, did you lose your phone? Look at this phone, is it yours? Qiao Ji took out the phone that Tang Guo had thrown into the puddle yesterday. It had already been wiped clean. However, because of the water, It was broken and couldn't be turned on. As for whether she wanted to repair it or get a new one, it had nothing to do with him. However, the image of her throwing away her phone was deeply engraved in his mind. Little sister, this time, he didn't mention anything about yesterday. Tangua's face revealed a clean smile. It's mine, big brother. Thank you for returning my phone to me. No need to thank me. Returning things to their rightful owners is a traditional virtue in our country. Everyone should learn. Qiao Ji was originally a sunny and handsome person with a clean and gentle smile. When facing him, it felt as if a small sun was shining over. When the surrounding students heard his words, they couldn't help but respect him. In their hearts, they all thought that this good virtue should be maintained. However, I found this phone in the ditch. It might be broken. Tangua took the phone in her hands and said gratefully, "It's okay, it can still be used if it's fixed." There was nothing unusual on her face, as if yesterday's meeting was just a dream. That didn't happen. Little sister, I'm leaving. Big brother, take care. Big brother, what's your name? Qiao Ji answered without hesitation, "My name is Qiao Ji. I'm the new school doctor." Then, he quickly stopped talking. He almost said that if she had any illness, she could come to him and he could guarantee that the medicine would cure her. Fortunately, it stopped. Wasn't this cursing him to get sick? This little sister looked clean, fair and clean. She was also relatively thin and weak. With such a body, it would be best if she didn't fall sick. He didn't know why, but he couldn't control himself when talking to this strange girl. He had a feeling that he wanted to tell her everything. With this thought, Qiao Ji quickly bid farewell and left. It was too strange. He had to go back and clear his head. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1392. Tangua played with the broken phone in her hand and snorted in her heart. So that guy was the new school doctor. The system was trembling. It didn't know what the host was thinking. But that guy's behavior shouldn't make the host hate him. But the host must want to tease him. Actually, he was quite happy to see such a scene. After school in the afternoon, Tangua walked out of the school gate and saw Wu Lingling standing with a few hooligans. Those hooligans looked at Wu Lingling with an ambiguous look in their eyes. He said something to Wu Lingling in a low voice and even showed his phone to Wu Lingling. In the end, Wu Lingling left with those gangsters. Tangua didn't intend to stop them. Wouldn't that be looking for trouble? But Wu Lingling had already seen her. She turned around and called out maliciously, "Cousin." Lingling. Tangua had to stop. Lingling, no matter what happened before, it's not my fault that I lost my phone and didn't receive any calls. Also, don't make a scene in the classroom next time. If you have anything to say it in private. Cousin, didn't you have something to say to me before? Wu Lingling suddenly said, "What is it? Can you say it now?" Wu Lingling didn't want to leave with these hooligans at all, but they were holding her photo in their hands. Now that Tangua was out, she thought of a way to get rid of them. She would use Tangua to leave first. Tangua was so beautiful that she might attract the attention of these hooligans. Anyway, she had already been dragged down. It would be best to drag down the main culprit who caused her to suffer. Who knew what would happen if word got out that a good student was hanging out with hooligans in the past? Something. Tangua was confused. What is it? I don't remember telling you anything. Oh right, I have to go to the police station. Yesterday, not only did I lose my phone, I also lost some other things. Those things aren't cheap. Until now, no one has come to return them. I have to call the police. Seeing Tangua's fair and clean appearance, the hooligans who had some thoughts immediately woke up. Looking at the car behind Tangua, it was obvious that it didn't belong to an ordinary family. Forget it, it was better not to provoke this kind of person whose background he did not know. If he provoked someone he could not afford to provoke, then it would be difficult for him to survive. Lingling, I still have to go to the police station, so I'll leave first. Otherwise, it'll be very late when I get home. Recently, my mom has been very strict and doesn't allow me to come home late. Tang Guo didn't care about Wu Lingling's astonished look and got in the car directly. He wanted to drag her down with him? No way. Judging from the looks of those hooligans, they should have woken up and would not target her for the time being. She didn't want to send these hooligans to jail before she could torture Wu Lingling. No matter what, Wu Lingling had to go through all the hardships first. She sat in the car seat with the corners of her lips slightly raised. "Miss Tang, are we going straight to the police station?" "Go home." "Understood." The driver didn't ask further. He understood that Tang Guo just didn't want to talk to Wu Lingling. Mother Tang and Father Tang had already told him to try his best to prevent Tang Guo and Wu Lingling from getting too close. If Tang Guo and Wu Lingling were together, he had to report it to them. Tang Guo didn't deliberately investigate this, so she didn't know that Father Tang and Mother Tang cared more about her than before. They no longer ignored many aspects of her just to make money. Chapter 1393. Even though Tang Guo was well behaved, didn't cause trouble, and had excellent grades, Wu Lingling's incident had taught them a lesson. Her parents didn't dare to work so hard and forget to care about their daughter's life. Especially when they found out that Wu Lingling was now a delinquent girl who often hung out with a bunch of hooligans. It was common for her to skip classes and leave early. They broke out in a cold sweat. Fortunately, their daughter was well behaved. What if she became an unruly child like Wu Lingling because of their neglect? Mrs. Tang had even told Tang Guo to take care of her cousin, Wu Lingling. If Wu Lingling led Xiao Guo astray, who could she cry to? Wu Lingling had caused such a big scene at Tang Guo's birthday party that Mrs. Tang had already given up on her. She cared about her younger sister, but she wouldn't sacrifice her daughter just because she cared about her younger sister. If Wu Lingling got into trouble one day because she had told her daughter to take care of Wu Lingling, would her well-behaved daughter really help Wu Lingling because she was too obedient? Were those hooligans someone a young girl could afford to offend? If something happened, it would be too late to regret it for the rest of her life. This week, the couple didn't work as hard as they could. Instead, they got someone to investigate the area around Tang Guo's school. They found that there were a lot of hooligans around. They often bullied students in the alleys, demanded protection fees, and robbed students of their money. Wu Lingling was also close to those hooligans. When they found out, the couple felt so lucky that they arranged a chauffeur for Tang Guo to pick her up. Xiao Guo. Tang Guo was surprised to receive her mother's call. "Mom, what's the matter?" "Stay away from Lingling in the future. Don't hang out with her. It'll affect your studies." "Okay, Mom." "I saw Lingling hanging out with her friends outside the school again today." When Mother Tang heard this, she hurriedly reminded Tang Guo several times. After Tang Guo agreed, she hung up the phone. Then, she thought about it and decided to tell Qin Ruolan about it. After all, Qin Ruolan was her younger sister. She couldn't control Wu Lingling, but she had to remind her. Qin Ruolan was still a little angry when she heard this, and said that she would do something about it. Mrs. Tang didn't care that much, and just kindly reminded her. "Ruolan, did your Wu Jun go to work?" When Mrs. Tang thought of this, she was filled with anger. A grown man like Wu Jun only knew how to laze around all day, get drunk and do nothing. Qin Ruolan even cherished him and said that Wu Jun doted on her. "Sister, don't worry so much. Life is still going on. So you didn't go to work?" "Sister, don't say that. Actually, Wu Jun can be in charge of internal affairs and I can be in charge of external affairs." Mrs. Tang didn't try to talk her out of it. There was no way she could persuade her sister back. "Then you should take care of Lingling. She's already in her 3rd year of middle school. With her grades, she won't be able to get into this high school. You still have to take care of the two of them." This sentence made Qin Ruolan's heart turn cold. It seemed that her sister really didn't care about Wu Lingling anymore. When she heard about those things, she wasn't angry. Now that Mrs. Tang didn't help pay for the school fees, Qin Ruolan was furious. She planned to teach Wu Lingling a lesson when she came back. At this moment, Wu Lingling was in a KTV room with some gangsters. It was a mess inside. One of the gangsters pinched her and whispered in her ear, "If you have time, bring your friends over to play. Otherwise, we'll hang your photo outside. Remember, bring those who are obedient." She wanted to talk about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down with more like-minded people. Talk about life, find friends peak. Chapter 1394. Knowing that Wu Lingling was close to the hooligans outside the school, Mrs. Tang and Mr. Tang also made changes to their work. They no longer focused on their work. Originally, they only went home once a month. Now, they went home at least twice a week. Basically, every Friday, either Mrs. Tang or Mr. Tang would personally drive to pick up Tang Guo. Tang Guo was quite satisfied with this result. The scene of the two of them picking up Tang Guo from school would occasionally be seen by the hooligans outside. Originally, because of Wu Lingling and Tang Guo's relationship, they had planned to let Wu Lingling trick Tang Guo into coming out to play. But now, they gave up. Except for Wu Lingling, who would glare at Tang Guo fiercely and hatefully every time. Tang Guo's life and studies could be said to be very peaceful. She might feel peaceful, but the students in the school did not feel the same way. Especially Tang Guo's classmates. They realized that their merit students' grades had improved again. In the past few tests, she had scored full marks in all the science subjects. It was beyond their reach. They could no longer be jealous. They could only look up to her and envy her. Moreover, they could not be jealous of Tang Guo. This good student not only improved by himself, but he also patiently helped them, allowing them to improve together. Wu Lingling was walking in a dark direction, farther and farther away from the light. Tang Guo, on the other hand, was walking in the opposite direction. The more she walked, the brighter she became. In the eyes of the students and teachers, no matter where she stood, she was shining brightly. She was perfect and impeccable. In junior high, every time Wu Lingling heard about Tang Guo, her hatred for Tang Guo deepened. One day, Tang Guo's parents did not come after school. It was the driver who came to pick her up. She had just walked out of the school gate when she saw Wu Lingling and a few hooligans hanging out with a group of hooligans. When Wu Lingling saw her, she glared at her fiercely and turned her head away. As for those delinquent girls, they all stood beside one of the delinquents. When Tang Guo got into the car, they all walked together in a certain direction. As they gradually left the school, the hooligans placed their hands on the waists of the delinquent girls. The delinquent girls did not struggle. It was Wu Lingling who introduced the delinquent girls around her to the group of hooligans. Yes, these junior high school girls were rebellious to begin with, and there were also cases of puppy love. Those hooligans would say a few words, buy them some food, take them out to play, and don't care about anything else, just hang out with them. The system said, "Keep an eye on Wu Lingling. If she tries to touch a good student, let me know." Tang Guo supported her chin with one hand. "She's just a delinquent. Don't bother about her." Understood, Madam Host. 2 days later, when Tang Guo was chatting with Mrs. Tang, she heard that Qin Ruolan was complaining to Mrs. Tang that Wu Lingling was even more disobedient recently. She often did not come home and said that she was spending the night at her classmate's house. She lowered her head and laughed. Qin Ruolan was still complaining about Wu Lingling's disobedience. Did she not worry that Wu Lingling was really staying at her classmate's house when she did not come home at night? "Your youngest aunt is silly," Mrs. Tang said. "If she wanted to leave your youngest uncle and live alone with Lingling, she would definitely have a better life than now. Mom, this is her own choice. She won't listen to you even if you try to persuade her." "I know." Mrs. Tang sighed. "All right, let's not talk about this. As long as our Xiao Guo is fine, everything is fine." Wu Lingling had hurt her feelings, so she did not want to do something that was difficult and unrewarding. Fupin Chinese Pinnacle. Chapter 1395. Those hooligans were not satisfied with little delinquents at all. Little delinquents were not as fun as good students, especially the leader of the hooligans. He knew that Wu Lingling was being controlled by his subordinates and even dragged her own little sister into it. His restless thoughts couldn't be stopped no matter what. He asked his subordinates to find Wu Lingling and threaten her to bring good students out to play. It would be best if their parents were very busy and did not pay much attention to their lives and studies. Usually, such students were more obedient and did not dare to tell their parents if anything happened. Firstly, they were not close to their parents and were too shy to speak. Secondly, they were afraid of embarrassing themselves. Once their parents came to the school and made a fuss, many people would know about it. At that time, they would be the ones embarrassed. Little girls could not bear the consequences of such a thing. Wu Lingling agreed readily without any hesitation. Ever since she had dragged her friends down with her, she had a feeling that after all that had happened to her, those good students in school were still studying well and looking good. Her idea was to drag those good students down with her. Especially those few students in her class whom she disliked. Brother Knife, don't worry. I will make you satisfied. Wu Lingling smiled and said to Brother Knife. Brother Knife was one of the more trusted subordinates of the hooligan boss. It was also the same one who held a knife to her neck. In the end, because she did not manage to get through to Tang Guo, Brother Knife listened to the hooligan boss and threw her to the hooligans. Of course, she hated this man in her heart. But the person she hated the most was Tang Guo. She was the model student who had a clean smile and seemed to be shining wherever she went. She was envied by countless people. Why? Why was Tang Guo able to look so good from a young age and even have a chauffeur to fetch her to and from school? If she had lived in such a family since young, she would not have been taken away by Brother Knife, and she would not have encountered everything that happened later. She would not have been threatened by them and fallen into the abyss. Her first target was the class monitor of her class, who was also the top student in school. That girl was clean and the boys said that she was beautiful when she smiled. The teachers liked each other, and so did the students. She hated this girl because every time she skipped class, the other party would remember it clearly. If it wasn't for the fact that she remembered the place so clearly, she wouldn't have been criticized by the whole school every week because she skipped class too many times. On the second day after promising Brother Dao, Wu Lingling had been paying attention to that girl after school. The other party happened to be on duty today. By the time everything was done, most of the people in the school had left. As soon as the girl walked out of the school gate, she was caught by Wu Lingling and the other delinquents and dragged into the alley. The girl was just about to shout, "Wu Lingling, what are you doing?" when they covered her mouth forcefully. "Host, Miao Ruru has been dragged to an alley." The system hurriedly reported to Tang Guo. Wu Lingling's activities in school had always been monitored by the system. Today, Wu Lingling and the others were in the washroom discussing how to drag Miao Ruru away and hand her over to the hooligans. Tang Guo made a decision. After school, she called the chauffeur and told him to wait for a while. She wanted to finish her homework before going back. Then, she took out a set of leather clothes and pants from the system storage, as well as a black mask. As long as she tied her hair up, she would transform into a good student, Tang Guo. I want to chat with more like-minded people about transmigration, female supporting character, calm down. Chat about life, find a confidant tilde peak. Chapter 1396. Tang Guo quickly went out of the classroom. According to the location specified by the system, she walked to a wall of the school. She climbed up the wall as if she was as light as a feather, and nimbly climbed over the wall. A female cat burglar? Qiao Ji was holding a pair of binoculars and saw a skinny figure in a black leather jacket and pants jumping over the wall. When he wanted to take another look, the figure had already jumped over the wall. He held the binoculars and felt a little regretful that he did not see it clearly just now. He did not expect the school to be so interesting. There were strange girls and a female cat burglar in the afternoon. It was much more interesting for him to be the school doctor than to be in the hospital. He wondered what other interesting things would happen in the next few days. Qiao Ji thought about it silently. His mind was filled with that fair and clean girl. He quickly shook his head. What kind of nonsense was he thinking? Miao Ruru thought that Wu Lingling only wanted to snatch her money or teach her a lesson at most. After all, she remembered clearly how Wu Lingling skipped classes and left early every time. She was the class monitor. It was her duty to record such things. It was impossible for her not to remember. She would definitely offend some students who liked to skip classes. She was not surprised that Wu Lingling hated her. She really did not expect that Wu Lingling and a few delinquents would drag her to an alley. There were a few hooligans waiting in the alley. She could tell at a glance that these hooligans were different from the other hooligans. Most of these hooligans were above 20 years old. They were not students. She felt that something was wrong and wanted to run away. However, she was held down by a few girls and her mouth was gagged. She could only stare and ask Wu Lingling what she wanted to do. Brother Knife really did not expect Wu Lingling to be so heartless. She actually brought a pretty girl here. Boss will definitely like her face. They were not afraid of what would happen. In fact, as long as her family background was not good and her parents were busy, this kind of obedient girl was the easiest to deal with. They just needed to take some photos and threaten her a little to ensure that she would not dare to say anything. Their boss liked this kind of fresh and tender girl the most. Miao Ruru heard their words and her face was filled with despair. Moreover, they even had a van parked at the entrance of the alley. At this time, no one was passing by. Even if she passed by, who would dare to meddle in the affairs of these hooligans? Wu Lingling and the other delinquents even surrounded her in the middle. No one would be able to tell. Tears flowed out of Miao Ruru's eyes. She regretted not running away when she saw Wu Lingling. Bring her into the car. Let's go quickly so that we don't get into trouble. Brother Knife instructed as Wu Lingling and the other girls escorted Miao Ruru into the car. At this moment, Tangwa jumped over the school wall. He ran up to Brother Knife and gave him a kick in the face, causing him to wail in pain. Before Wu Lingling and the others could react, she took a few steps forward and backhanded a few slaps on the faces of Wu Lingling and the others. Among them, she hit Wu Lingling the hardest. Her face immediately swelled up. Wu Lingling's eyes were filled with tears. She covered her face. She didn't know that this girl in black leather jacket and pants with a mask would suddenly appear and hit her. Who are you? Tangwa pulled Miao Ruru behind her and said, they're the ones who beat you up. Fupin Chinese Vertex. Chapter 1397. Miao Ruru hid behind Tangwa, trembling and unable to say a word. She did not dare to imagine what would happen if she was really brought into that car. She looked at Wu Lingling, whose face was swollen from the slap, and her eyes were filled with hatred. Wu Lingling, this is not over. Wu Lingling's heart skipped a beat. She panicked and tugged at Brother Knife. Brother Knife, what should we do? This was her first time doing something like this. She did not expect that someone would come out and ruin things. Brother Knife's face hardened. Catch that girl. He was also furious that he was kicked in front of everyone. Furthermore, it was in front of Wu Lingling, a delinquent girl. He could not hold back his pride. He might as well catch such a nosy and weirdly dressed girl and teach her a lesson. After following his boss for so many years, he had never been afraid of anything. He had seen many situations where a white knife entered and a red knife appeared. Why should he be afraid of a little girl? Let's run. Miao Ruru was very grateful. She thought that Tangwa might be a cosplay enthusiast who happened to pass by and saved her. There were so many people now. If she was not afraid, she would definitely be in trouble. She held on to Tangwa's hand tightly and looked around, calculating which direction to run from. She did not think that the two girls would be able to beat those hooligans. As for how Wu Lingling treated her, it was better to get out of here first. I will bring you out later. Don't be afraid. Miao Ruru did not believe her. But then, She saw those hooligans rushing up and being beaten up by Tang Guo. She swallowed her saliva. She was not a cosplayer but a martial arts enthusiast, right? She was lucky to have met her. While those people were distracted, she took out her phone from her bag and called the police. No matter what, it was Wu Lingling who dragged her to this place and handed her over to the hooligans. If she did not call the police today, she did not know if Wu Lingling would do anything to others. After Miao Ruru called the police while trembling, she saw Tang Guo beating up all the hooligans. Wu Lingling and the other girls were also slapped a few times by Tang Guo. Hold your head and lean against the wall. Wu Lingling and the other delinquents were scared after being beaten up. When they saw those delinquents lying on the ground and wailing, they didn't dare to resist at all. They obediently hugged their heads and leaned against the wall. I've already called the police, Miao Ruru said. Thank you. She glanced at Tang Guo's mask. Tang Guo had no intention of taking it off. Tang Guo used a voice changer when she spoke. There were plenty of such things in the system space. She gave people the impression that she was an obedient girl. Who would have thought that she had such a side to her? Yes. Tang Guo replied coldly. She did not intend to leave immediately. There are surveillance cameras on the streets outside the school. When the police come later, you can remind them to collect evidence. I understand. After Miao Ruru answered, she suddenly had a question. When the police arrived later, wouldn't Tang Guo be there too? Soon, she had an answer. When the police car arrived at the entrance of the alley, the girl standing beside her jumped over the wall and entered the alley. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. Miao Ruru couldn't even call out to her. When the police arrived in front of her, Tang Guo had already disappeared. Wu Lingling and the other delinquents, Brother Dao and the other hooligans, and Miao Ruru were all taken to the police station. Miao Ruru told the truth. Midway, a cosplayer who knew martial arts jumped over the wall and helped her. The peak. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.